Good morning, this is Jamie. I have in front of me two pieces in my Scottish Kelpie series. These two are the Kelpie in water, and it is, in both cases, in a shape-shifting stage. Kelpies appear in three ways that I'm aware of. One is human form, one is the form of a horse, and then a more mysterious form, which would be its natural form in the water. I believe, so far, that that is a hippocamp. So it would have the upper front area of the creature being a horse form, and the other half would be a fishy kind of aquatic form. Both of these are shifting from horse to human, and they are both in the water. So, although aware of this potential for it to be a hippocamp, first and foremost, when in the water, this is what came to me. And since I'm also working with my subconscious here, I let it happen. This is the state that wants to come out, the horse transforming into the human form. At some point I'll push it to go from the hippocamp to the horse, or hippocamp to human, but for now this is something deep inside of me that is wanting to show itself. So I need to do that in part because, well, in a large part, because I had a dream of an interaction with a Kelpie when I was young. And I spoke to my mother about that dream, and it really frightened her. I wasn't raised with a lot of awareness of my ancestral beliefs, although as I learn them, I'm beginning to see how they were absolutely there. My mother's fear that the fairies would steal me or switch me, my mother being very frightened of this dream and concerned if I had made a deal with this Kelpie that was in my dream. So, interestingly, I think exploring now at this point in my life, exploring as much of the lore as I can, is actually incredibly grounding and important, and the mysteries within it are fascinating. And whether you see it as an actual being, as a Kelpie as a being, as some sort of spirit, or I heard one person in a video call it a demon, I find that is a rather dubious kind of terminology, because it's often coming from a Christian reference, but it is most certainly predatory. It uses its shape-shifting abilities to seduce and claim its victims, its prey. So, you know, in some stories I've heard of the Kelpie not necessarily consuming the prey, but taking it down to its world, more akin to the fae, the fairies. So I really don't know. And I don't know where this journey of exploring these Kelpies in this way is going to take me. But I see it as a really powerful allegory for how we are seduced not only by other human beings, but by ideas and by technology and by one another, and usually, well, often to our peril. Not necessarily. You know, seduction isn't always a horrible thing, but it is this deception, this shape-shifting deception, that really concerns me, because there is a vast difference between the sort of shape-shifting we have to do to meet our job requirements. Let's say when you are a server and your customer is incredibly rude and you would really like to walk away, but you have to stay. You have a responsibility. You have to be professional, and you have to stick it out and maintain that professionalism with your customer and do your best to resolve the situation. And those are good things. And I would call that a kind of shape-shifting, a kind of transformational thing that you have to perform in order to overcome your fight or flight, fight or flight, pardon me. To transform is actually a real gift. It's an ability, and it doesn't mean you aren't yourself as well. You have to draw upon another part of yourself to overcome your fears. And the Kelpie does represent a lot of powerful ideas, and it's very iconic, and it has something for us to learn. It has something for us to to learn from it as a teacher. And of course, it's a warning. It's a warning. Things are not always what they seem. And that can go both ways. Something really fearsome and frightening can actually turn out to be something that is actually not threatening at all. And something that looks seductive, like the Kelpie, can be dangerous to us. So, it just says slow down. The Kelpie says slow down. Don't judge too quickly. Let time tell. And I agree with this, because it's way too easy to make snap judgments about things by the way they appear. And we do bring our filters with us wherever we go, no matter how hard we strive. Those filters are intervening in what is actually in front of us. So, we have to address those things if we really want to be authentic and honest in life, and fair and safe. We can't always be safe. That isn't possible. That's the way this incredible creation we exist in works. But we can be smarter. We can push ourselves to grow and be more astute. And apparently, in some of what I've been studying, the Kelpie sort of cross with a human is actually a really resilient horse. Possibly could be also in human form, I don't know. But really very, very strong, has incredible endurance. And I haven't heard anything negative about that combination. And what I'm wondering is that could be some sort of analogy for us to be a little bit like the Kelpie, but to maintain our humanity so that we are not predacious, but yet have the strength and the gifts of the Kelpie. It's a fine line. So, again, allegory has a lot to share with us, to teach us, and I think this exploration of the Kelpie is really incredibly worthwhile on a personal level, and I think it has a lot for those who will be exposed to the work. So onward. I am doing a number of these where the Kelpie is in shape-shifting mode. And as I said at the beginning, that I still need to look at, that mysterious form under the water or just coming out of the water. What, the question being, what is its original shape, its true shape? Or are these all true to the Kelpie? Because I'm thinking yes. I think they are all part of the Kelpie. But something I brought out on this one, and if you look at humans, where are our eyes set? They're set in front. And that means we've evolved as a predator. And horses have their eyes on the side, and all creatures with eyes on the side are most inclined to not be predators. So here in this one, the head is starting to reform or to form into a more human head. And the eye, you can see the eyes are in the same place, but the cheek and the head are starting to fill in behind that eye, which is going to place it in the front. And I have to say, since I've been working on this series, I have been contemplating the times in my life where I feel that I have been seduced or tricked or deluded. And I say deluded, and in saying that, I take responsibility, because that word comes from delusions, and delusions are things that we experience. They're not just, things done to us from someone else that are done to fool us into thinking something that isn't true. So delusions are things we carry with us all the time. So I think, that's something I'm learning to distinguish even late in the day. I know those definitions. It's not that. It's just that I think when we're interacting with each other, we can delude ourselves into believing people are something other than what they are, or a situation is something other than what it is, and it just takes time for us to straighten that out. And that's not necessarily going to be a bad thing. We may have a delusion that believes that something is wholly negative, and really it isn't. We may delude ourselves in many kinds of ways from many angles. So I'm not just, looking at this whole journey as, the exploration of a villain. There's always something to teach us about being human. And I think that recognizing all the facets of our humanity, both positive and negative, and exploring them in a good way, can give us more compassion for others and more understanding for others, because often bullies are victims of bullying themselves, things like that. It's become a real deal, but people forget. And just as I'm taking time to contemplate with this series, it's equally important to take time and contemplate, not dwell, but contemplate the events of our day, our interactions, to strive not to label, to strive not to judge. And I say strive with a great deal of intention, because branding something arbitrarily is usually creating some kind of false impression. So labels, labeling, naming, those are useful things, but they can also betray us. They can also be traps if we don't look deeper. So I think this whole thing here is going places that are really important to journey into. So I don't know how many I'm going to produce. I hope to produce a really strong body of work. There are other Kelpies that I've created, but this grouping is all about the water, the still pool, the roaring waves. It's got a lot going on in that regard. I have been working on some of them that deal with their human interaction, and I can only deal with doing those so much at a time, because some of them are looking at that point where the victim realizes, that they're hooped. And you look into your own life and you revisit sometimes the things, those moments in your own life where you suddenly realize, okay, I am hooped and this isn't going to be good. You know, whether it's a car accident or someone's fist coming at you, whatever it might be, you know, you are revisiting it. So that part of the series definitely deals with trauma. And yeah, only so much of that at one time is good. And I'm able to stop at a point where I'm good. I'm still good. And knowing when to stop there is really important. And so I think every piece of this puzzle is going to be incredible. It may take me a while, but I am pushing harder to complete a body of work because I don't want it to just dwindle and become this aimless journey. I think we can drive ourselves in a good way towards investigating with a sense that there will be resolution at the end. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't feel that that's negative at all. And I'm doing it in ways that feel right and feel good. And the whole decision-making process, you know, sometimes it's been a little peculiar, but it's working. And the moment that I make those decisions I really need to make with this, it feels right. And that's what I'm going with. And I'm finding that's a theme in my life lately, is go with those decisions that feel right. Might not feel good, but do it because it's the right thing to do. And this series is very much about that. I am working on 3 or 4, well, it's 4 really, but 4 series in clay right now. One is the Kelpie. The other one is the Pictish hippocamps that I've been working on in raku so far. Another is anatomy and botany interactions and the connections of the body and plant and medicine and healing and all these amazing things. And those are studies in the forms as well as the lore and the knowledge. The other was one I started ages ago and then dropped because I started work on the Pictish grandmothers. I started work on the Pictish series because I was asked by a colleague to participate in a 3-person show. And it was awesome, and that was so worth doing, and I'm so grateful. Thank you, Giselle, for spearheading that. You're amazing. However, I didn't go back to the horses that I was working on then, and those horses were very much about ideas of sculpture and our conceptualization of movement. I do very much want to go back and do more of those, because right now they're kind of sitting in boxes and getting broken, and it's a shame. But, you know, I moved from that place to other work, and the Pictish ancestral exploration was hugely important to me as a human being, and it really helped connect me to my grandmother. And this grandmother I did not spend much time with. I only got to visit with her a handful of times, and that's something that shouldn't happen between grandparents and grandchildren, but it does through no fault of our own. It's life. We can't always control those things. There's circumstances that really aren't anyone's fault necessarily. It's just the way it is, and you try to overcome that. However, you know, for myself, because my grandmother, both my grandmothers have passed away, obviously, at my age, you know, it was an incredible journey of connection with her, and I loved it, and I'm so grateful for doing that work. And this, you know, was a stepping stone to the work I'm doing now. However, all this said, I still, you know, would like to keep doing some work on the other horses. Another thing that's going on is that I haven't been painting, and I certainly haven't been drawing much either, and I think it's time I really started working on both those things. So I will be doing some drawings connected to the anatomy and botany studies, definitely, but quite possibly with these works as well. So we'll see what happens. And there are my thoughts for today and my updates on these kelpies. Have a great day. Well, what's happening here is that my hand has a lot of clay on it, and the red button just will not respond.